audience for doing the pre-work to get the sentiment of the students and the questions to me. So I think I'm well prepared to face the heat today and take on all the questions based on my experience of last 20 years in the industry. But very much like all of you, it's good to see. I think there's a healthy mix of both the MTech audience and the BTech audience. It's good to see uh, how how the SARC actually is continuing to reach out to the alumni to make them be a part of this campus experience, or the Campus Connect, where we can actually now share our experiences as alumni, learning from what we have learned so far. I hope with what we talk today, I can actually help you guys make decisions about not just about your job or about your student life, but also about your life in general. Because there are only three ways of learning, really. You learn by doing things, you learn by reading, and you learn by hearing others. This is the third form of learning today. I hope I had done most of it in my early days. I was a pretty introverted guy. I did not spend as much time in connecting with people, learning from them. But I did, I think, over a period of time, realize that, and I think my most learning has really come from the people I work with, the people I have connected with in the startup circle, in the entrepreneurship circle, in the trading circle, the Gujus and the Marwadis, in Microsoft for the last 15 years. As I begin this, I'll say find a mentor or find a set of mentors in your life, and make sure that you're continuing to learn. And learning is a journey that should not stop. Often we as individuals are not empowered to make the best of the decision. We make the best of our decision when we get into a group, and when we actually discuss, ideate, and talk. The biggest strength that IIT actually gave to me, and I hope you can also relate to it, is the amazing set of people that I came across, the diverse set of people that I came across when I came to the campus. And just by being in the company of the individuals, I actually did realize how much I learned with the diversity of thought, diversity of depth of thinking, and the induction effect that happens with all of us really working together. So I hope you are living your campus dream, making the best use of the 4 year and the 2 year you're spending in the campus, and you are not letting lose any of this opportunity as you're going through this. So as I say this, just for me to understand the audience better. So as all of us can see, there is 65% BTech student and 35% MTech student. I'll do a quick another survey here, just for me to understand how much time you have spent in IIT already. And I am projecting this question. So you can go back to the same link that's posted in the chat, and again, help me answer with this question. And then as we are doing this, are most of the students here are CSE, or is there a mix of CSE and other discipline as well?
There are majorly students are from CSE, but there are students from other disciplines as well.
Okay, got it. Okay, I get a sense that second year is predominantly more here, second, third year. Yeah. So great. I think let's move ahead with this. Second year really is the pivotal year in your journey in IIT, both for MTech students and the BTech students. For the BTech, it is because first year you get out of the common courses, and when you get into the second year, it's really time for you to make a bet on, or a decision, or a choice of the direction that you want to pick in terms of your specialization, in terms of the expertise that you would want to pick up further ahead in your career. And let me actually talk a bit about myself. You can continue to answer the poll. I will go back again. There are a bunch of more interactions we'll do along the way. But I personally, just for you to make sure that you can relate to my experiences, let me just talk a bit about where I come from, what I am, and what I have done, and where I am with set of choices, accidents, and luck that I've had along the way. And I will talk predominantly about my experiences in the campus at the IIT Bombay to make sure I can touch base with how some of the small experiences or small incidents in the campus, how it ended up having a profound effect on things that I did further ahead in my life. So I was born in this place called Siddharth Nagar, which is in Uttar Pradesh, and brought up in another place called Ayodhya, which has become one of the most popular places in these times. Back then, it was an unknown place. Then I did my schooling in Lucknow until 18 or 19 years of age, till I got to IIT Bombay. I had not seen any place outside of mostly the eastern part of UP. And I got into IIT Bombay. My JE rank was 121. And I was almost on the cusp of, I think, the place or the JE rank, which could have landed me in either in Kanpur or in Delhi or in Bombay. And back then, Bombay was not the number one in computer science, but today it is, and I'm pretty proud of it. Kudos to the faculties and the students who really made it happen. But my choice of IIT Bombay was really triggered by two things. One was I wanted to be farther away from my home so that I can gain independence, and number two was I really wanted to be an entrepreneur. And the reason for that was if I look back at it, because my uncles had two of my uncles. They were running the businesses, and they had tent house shops, and they were enjoying pretty independent and luxurious life. Luxurious in the sense of having the luxury of the time, not the luxury of money. My father was in a government job. He was a chief engineer in irrigation department in the Uttar Pradesh, and he would have this 9 to 5 job, mostly on tour, working really hard. And he's a pretty hard worker, and that's his inspiration. That's the inspiration I got from him. But then, looking at my uncles, I used to feel that I really want to be an entrepreneur, a businessman, and I made a choice to come to Bombay. Bombay was the dazzling city. Independence, though I got it, I don't know if I made the best use of it. But definitely, in my first year, Professor Amitabh Sanyal was the faculty advisor. And I remember he made us do a pretty intentional exercise of making sure that we have a sheet of paper, and on that we are writing down what do we want to see ourselves as 4 years from then when we pass out. We were, by the way, the batch in which the JE paper got leaked, and we were fortunate or unfortunate, whichever you see, each of us got 2 attempts at JE. So in the second attempt, and the second attempt was in the August time. The first exam I think happened in May, the second happened in June or July, and then we finally got into the campus around the end of August. So our first year was pretty rushed up. So by the time we did this exercise of writing it down on the paper, and I wrote down that by the end of the fourth year, I want to be an entrepreneur. And I didn't know how I would get there, but I think having that vision of where I want to be by the end of the four year was a pretty tremendous belief in destiny. And I keep talking about how basically when you make a desire, all the galaxies in the universe, they line up to fulfill your desire. So that, starting from that day one to my end of fourth year, I somehow, if I look back, the dots got connected, and I ended up being an entrepreneur. So how did I get there? Really, I think there are a bunch of good questions that Tanay has shared with me, and I'll talk about that. But it was primarily serendipity. I was good at coding. I was a pretty hard worker. I was pretty popular because of my coding. But I got popular because of another reason. There used to be this site called Hangama.com, and I wrote the script which would go to Hangama.com, answer their poll questions, and then win a bunch of gifts. And I was the only one in the campus who had this postman visiting my dorm in Hostel 4. almost every day with a bunch of gifts, and people got curious. They asked me, "What are you doing? How are you getting this?" And I spilled the beans. My script became very popular. Almost everyone was running that script on their machine, and everyone was getting a lot of gifts from Hangama.com. Hangama.com and Contest to Win. These were two sites. And Hangama.com and Contest to Win were pretty happy because they were getting eyeballs. We were happy because we were getting free gifts. But then what happened was the proxy server in IIT Bombay that crashed. And Professor Siva Kumar, he was the network in charge for IIT Bombay. And just before it crashed, I think 2 days before that, he called me. He said, "You are the he nominated me as the secretary for the network administration for the whole of IIT." But then this crashed, and the repercussions were that a lot of things came to halt. And he called me in his office, and he said, "Can you investigate what happened?" I was silent for a moment, but then I took over the ownership or the accountability of what had happened. He did not scold me. He did not say anything, but he said, essentially, "You're fired." Um, so that's how I gained popularity, and I'll talk more about it when I go to my campus experience. But Shaadi.com happened, and there was a bunch of failures beneath Shaadi.com, and Shaadi.com was the end result of what we see today. I got introduced to Shaadi.com through one of my seniors named Chirag Kantaria. He was a pretty good hacker, 3 years senior to me. Him and I struck off a good chemistry in the old software lab during the night hacking sessions. When he would be there, I would be there, and we'll be sharing tips and tricks on how to really hack and code. We became good friends, and he referred me to Anupam Mittal, who's now who's the CEO of Shaadi.com. So Anupam Mittal, Pooja Mittal, Anand Mittal were the three brother and sister trios who were doing Shaadi.com. Back then, it was called People Interactive Limited, and they had their office in this place called Chira Bazaar in Bombay, in the South Bombay. So Chirag introduced me to Anupam, and Chirag essentially had a lot of his third year and fourth year load, probably because of which he was not able to give them time. I was in the first year summers, or the second year, first year summer, essentially. And I went and I met up with these people, and they really wanted me to help with the technology piece. There were a bunch of things that we did. We did this thing called Polyester Online. Polyester Online was a B2B marketplace. I think it still exists out there if you want to check. Then there was ethnicresources.com. Ethnic Resources was B2C. It was even C2C, because ethnic resources was where people of certain ethnicity will come together and share their article or sell their article to each other by way of auction. And then we did tajgifts.com, which was a B2C. All three of them were either mild success or like a failure. Shaadi.com back then was called Sagai.com. And Sagai.com, we made a beginning. We did all the pieces of technology, but it wasn't a success. It was not even close to a success. Until we began analyzing what's going wrong. There were two problems really. Problem number one was that we had not got our customer nail. We did not know who our customer is and who our competitors are. So for Shaadi.com, the competitor really was these marriage brokers in the tier 2 and tier 3 cities, the Pandit who roam around from house to house, fixing marriages within certain communities. That was aha number one. Aha number two was that this was 1998 to 2000. Credit cards were not popular. E-commerce had not picked up. Indians really were pretty apprehensive of putting any payment or making any payment through any online store. So the aha number two there was that we really cannot just survive with the online commerce website. We really need to go and open physical stores in each tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 cities. So that's what happened, yeah, so that's what happened. And I'm just seeing if there are any action that I'm missing out on the chat. Okay, great. So that's what happened. And Shaadi.com ended up opening tier 2 and tier 3 office places, and those really took off in a great way, because then the interaction between users and Shaadi.com was via those physical stores in tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 cities. The second thing that happened was the change of domain name from Sagai.com to Shaadi.com. Obviously, the real purpose of the e-commerce site was Shaadi, not just Sagai. So when we changed over to Shaadi.com and made sure that we advertise it, it really picked up. And even till today, Shaadi.com has not even raised a single paisa of money from any of the VCs. And it is the second biggest e-commerce success in India after IRCTC. At least this was true until Amazon and Flipkart and Myntra, all these people really picked off in big way a couple of years back. But I think it was pretty ahead of its time, and it found the niche customer segment. Till date, it has married around 12 lakh couples, so which also is a big accomplishment. I feel fortunate to make impact in the life of 12 lakh people. So hopefully some of you may end up using Shaadi.com if you haven't found your soulmates yet. Okay, so that was that. But what led to Shaadi.com was a failure, essentially. So that takes me to my second question. Let me actually. Second question. Okay, so this is the question. Did you ever flunk in any subject, either in IITs, before IITs? Have you ever had any kind of academic failure in your life? And then we'll talk about how do you fail, how do you deal with it? I like the folks who are answering not yet. So I, in a way, you're acknowledging that failure is a way to success, and failure till date does not mean that you'll never fail. But be prepared for the failure in a beautiful way. Awesome. I got the sense. So essentially, a lot of we have not failed in academics, which is good. I mean, which is expected. And that's the reason why you made it to the computer science branch in IIT Bombay, which is a top-notch university for computer science. So I was in a similar boat. I had never failed in my life. And I think I had too much fun with the night out, with the water fight. Hostel 3 is where I got admitted. And then ultimately I changed over to Hostel 4. But there was this course in probability called Probability or MA 101, which was taken by Professor VM Alhadi. And I was the class representative of my class. And with the night outs and the water fight and all the kiragiri that used to go on, by the morning I would be terribly sleepy, but I still had to go to the campus because I had to mark my attendance. So I would go there, I would sit on the first bench because of the class representative, and then by the time professor would start speaking, I would go to sleep on the first bench, and then the professor would call out who's the CR of the class, and people will say that guy who's sleeping in the first row. So as a result, I think I ended up losing my currency with the professor, and he flunked me, and along with me, he flunked 8 people in the computer science batch who failed in probability. And probability was a subject that never in the history of Professor Alhadi anyone had failed. So this was the first time people failed, and maybe because of me. But as a result, what happened was I did not know how to handle that failure. That note went to my parents in Lucknow. They looked at it. They said, "What happened? This is not really how you have been, but anyway, you know how to deal with it. So figure it out and make the most of it." So as a result, I ended up in the IITs during the summer vacation. That was essentially the time when I did Shaadi.com. I also did work with Professor Saumin Chakravarti, who had just moved from US to India. I hear some background sound. If people can mute themselves. Penny, can you help mute the audience?
Yeah, sure. I should mute all the people.
Okay. I don't know. I'll continue. I still hear the background noise, but fine. We'll go ahead. Yeah, so Professor Somin had just moved from US to India. He was looking for students during the summer vacation who can work on this project called Memex. Memex was the community browsing and archival experience based on ML and AI back then. And I had this amazing opportunity to work with him. Along with me, there were two more students who joined me, who are pretty active in the AI and ML circle today, based in US, Manyam and Mithul Tiwari. So I had this profound opportunity of A, clearing my backlog in probability, B, taking on AI and ML, which was completely rooted in probability. Because as most of you would understand, AI and ML is all about statistics, probability, calculus. So I think I took on two extremes and made sure that I double clear the cross mark that was put on my report card. But in that whole process, I discovered Shadi.com. During that time was also the time when I got involved in Mood Indigo. And Mood Indigo is this. If you have not participated in TechFest or Mood Indigo as an organizing committee, I'll say go ahead and do it, because it will add so many other dimensions in your life, which are so much more valuable as you move ahead in your life. Because if you realize, we are never taught in our education system about communication, about taxes, about finance, about empathy. And the more you tread out of your traditional education regime, the more you will get to know how to work with the word out there. Because I think finishing IIT was one part, but stepping out of IIT into the professional space was a very different aspect altogether. It turns out that that communication is one of the single most determinant of success when you work in a professional setup. I was very much an introverted. I had bad communication, bad stage presence. I could not talk. Forget about I could not talk in front of the audience or getting onto the stage. I was a pretty shy kind of a person. But that all just transformed in the last 20 years. And for those of you who are like me, there's a lot of hope, and I have got this hope working with folks in Microsoft and my entrepreneurship circle, learning from them and transforming myself. So without losing much time, after Shadi.com and my third year and fourth year. So in my third year, there used to be these Eureka business plan competition. And since I was known, I was popular, I was approached by a senior again in Hostel 4. Oh, by the way, before I get to Hostel 4, let me tell you how I made it to Hostel 4. So hostels were getting distributed. I got allocated back to Hostel 3. I was supposed to stay in Hostel 3. And I was approached by this senior named PC. And he, I hope most of you have seen Chichore, right? Chichore, there is this story about how the student is actually negotiated to move out of the hostel. I was one of those guys actually, and I told this to Nitish also. So these stories which have been picked up from IIT Bombay are not they are actually factual. So he came, he negotiated, and he negotiated me for Amit Partani. Amit Partani was great in sports. He had bright chances of winning a GC. So I traded my place with Amit Partani, and I landed in Hostel 4. And that was again serendipity because I was the only computer science graduate in Hostel 4. So that made sure that I get all that TLC, tender love and care in Hostel 4. And that was the reason why I became the chosen one by this senior who really was looking for a partner to do a startup. So since I was the only guy, he chose me. And we together started this first campus startup called Mises.com. This was the time when Professor D.B. Pathak was trying to get the incubator off the ground. Incubator in IIT Bombay is the first amongst the equals in IIT in India, in the whole of India. So we did that, and we won the business plan competition. We immediately got the venture funding, and we started Mises. So we became quite popular in the campus in good ways and in bad ways, because we were also the students who were bearing the brunt about how like this whole notion of how can students really be making money they're supposed to be studying, and where is the balance between education and commercialization. There were a lot of advices to me that I should really consider dropping my education, being a drop-off. There are so many successful dropouts, and continuing with the entrepreneurship completely. I decided to choose my priority by focusing more on the startup and less on the education, but that was the way to do. but I did finish my education. And anyone who's going through that decision conundrum, make sure you're focusing on education. Finish it, and if you're planning to do further studies, focus on finishing your further studies. Never stop with education, because education is really what determines what shapes your outlook towards the world and the technology, and your impact really. While I was doing Masters.com, another thing happened. In my fourth year, I was working with a BTP advisor, and because of my busyness with Mises, which had by then moved out of the incubator out to Powai, the Silicon Valley of Bombay, as we call it today. We were the first one who moved there. We were the first one who established ourselves in the Central Avenue with the office there, above the Gary's restaurant, and because of that, my presence in campus got a lot more sketchier. And my PTP advisor shunted me. He said, "I'm disowning you. Don't even you. In the last 1 year, you showed up only once or twice. So I don't think I can do a BTP with you. You don't need to finish do your BTP with me." And I still, again, did not know what to do with that, because that would have meant that I don't. I'll have like BTP is a big part of fourth year. If you don't do it, then essentially you'll have to repeat your fourth year. So because of the relationship and the currency that I had built with Professor Somin Chakravarti, I ended up going back to him again. And I said, sir, this is what I'm doing. And my BTP is aligned with what I'm doing at Misers, because it was essentially a project about how do you really take web, mine it, and create a tree and create a reading view out of the news articles on the website. He was kind of impressed, because he appreciated that problem space, and he asked me to go ahead and do it. And Professor Sudarshan, he was my BTP evaluator. He finally I got A+, and I finished my BTP. But essentially, in this whole journey, I mean, if I connect the dot, there were so many failures along the way, so many places where I had to be creative about coming up with a solution, and that is what shaped me at the end of my journey. Because in this whole process, I got very resourceful. But as I'm saying this, in my fourth year, I got into Deloitte. Deloitte was my campus offer. And then the MD of Deloitte, Raj Joshi, he made an offer to me. He said that, I know you are an entrepreneur, you are running your startup, but we would really want you to join us if you consider anything outside of your startup. And it was also the time when the September 11 happened, the recession hit us, and all the companies began to withdraw their offer. Deloitte did not do that. Deloitte, all it asked us to do was to stay put with Bombay, with this company called Mastech. Mastech was just then acquired by Deloitte, so they asked us to kind of hold on to the fort in Bombay until they give us our allocated location. So my location was Orange County in California. I was supposed to join them, but I think being in Bombay for some more period of time and being part of the circle outside of Bombay just made me believe more in the potential of Bombay and the destiny of why I was there. So I ended up spending more time in Bombay, and then ultimately I said no to Deloitte, and I continued with my startup journey. But as the recession was going on, I really wanted to understand how the technology marries with the functional space out there. And because technology in itself has no value until you tie technology with the function and make sure that technology is really creating impact. So I started working with this company called Zycus. Zycus is still around. It's very popular. It's a multi-$100 million company now. It was a startup back then, and that company was into spend data management and essentially cost reduction. So the best kind of business to be in when the whole industry is going through recession. And I was there for around 8 months. 8 months, I learned quite a lot in terms of understanding how they're using AI and ML and really using it to kind of classify the the spend data and then create analysis on how these Fortune 100, Fortune 500 companies can really make millions of dollars of saving. And the business model was whatever saving they accrue for the Fortune 100 or 500 company, they'll take some X% of the cut as their commission. And that business model was quite recession proof. And I learned my lesson. But at the same time, I think the lesson was on the business model, but also the lesson was on the human side, because by the end of 8th month, I was fired for my attitude. Not for my aptitude. I was a pretty smart guy, but I was fired because of the way I dealt with people, how I rubbed them off, how I took panga with a lot of the senior folks in the company. And essentially, there was a challenge with how how I was proving out to be a professional, primarily because I've been in academic setup. Then I did my startup where I was where I was independent and I was in a way the head of the company. And then moving over to this company Zycus, where I was heading the product management. And then my people skills were pretty bad. I again disconnected. By this time, I had turned bankrupt, by the way. I did not want to go and ask my parents for more money. So I was bankrupt. I took a shelter in the small place called Surat, which is where one of my seniors had established his presence by then. He has a big textile company there. And he was trying to do another startup called Atishay. And I said, I'll come and help you, but give me a shelter so that I can incubate my ideas. My next idea was really to take technology and apply it in the financial space, in the stock market, and do the algo trading, the high frequency trading that we know of it today. I had no idea about stock market. I had never traded even a single share. Forgot about even knowing the technology of it. But again, this was one of the places where I set my eye on what I want to do, and then somehow I figured out how to get there. So I spent around 4, 5, 6 months in Surat, and I helped Mayank out, and at the same time I also established my base and my resilience to come back to Bombay again and do my third startup, which was Mintoos.com. This is when I worked with the likes of Harshad Mehta and Bigwigs, and made sure that I end up finding a partner and a gentleman by the name of Ashok Jogani, and both of us partnered, and we started the first quant trading firm in India in partnership with National Stock Exchange of India. By the time when all of this was happening, there was another accident that happened in Surat, where I made it to Havalat for a night on 26th January on 25th January night, and then 26th January I appeared before the magistrate, and I was let off, but it was an accident, and that's again one of the experiences that went along that shaped me as a human being and helped me better understand how to really treat life. Right. So coming into Microsoft was amazing, because I joined Microsoft in 2005. I was still continuing to moonlight with my quant trading setup. Microsoft gives you this benefit of moonlighting, where you work with Microsoft, but if your gig does not create a conflict of interest with what you're doing in Microsoft, you can do it as a moonlight in parallel. So you can essentially be doing your own startup at the same time you can be doing your job in Microsoft. So I got that privilege. I did that for around 4 years after joining Microsoft. So I was continuing to run my algo trading firm, and then I became part of Microsoft. In Microsoft, I joined as a program manager, and I did the one of the first software as services product called OneCare. Then I got fortunate to work on this again startup project called Office Live, which then became Office 365, which is now the biggest revenue-making business for Microsoft. So I was fortunate to be involved with it from day one as a program manager. Program manager, for those of you who don't know, are essentially the think of them as the mini CEOs in the company. They are the one who make the products happen, working with the engineers, working with the designers, working with the product sales and marketing, and making sure all of it comes together to ship the product. So I worked on Office 365, I worked on SharePoint, then ultimately I worked on Office product portfolio, Word, Excel, PowerPoint. And then in my last gig, I worked on Visio, heading the Visio desktop product. It was again one of those businesses which was completely moved to India from Redmond. It was a business that was not doing as well. But by the time I left, in 3 years I spent on Visio, it became a year-on-year growing business in double digit. Right. So. And then I decided to venture out and do something different in my career. And from being a program manager, I shifted over to this role of what is called chief of staff. So I started as a chief of staff for this small division of 350 people in 2017. And from in the last 3 years, that scope has grown from 350 people to currently 9,000 people. I'm currently the chief of staff for Microsoft India Development Center. And one of the biggest thing I have learned in this whole process is apart from the product and the business, how do you really also develop your people skills so that as a leader, you can really become a holistic leader, because your leadership really comes from uh, your strength in people, product, and business, all three. So last 3 years have really been about people, and this was sort of uncharted territory for me when I took this up as a career. But I continue to be a techie at heart, and I continue to spend still a good amount of time with quant trading and with entrepreneurship. So that was a slightly elongated version of what my life journey has been, primarily to make sure that when I begin to address the question, I can come back and relate to it and talk about what in this whole journey really shaped me to help equip answer some of those questions. Uh, okay, so that's my family. I have 2 daughters, and I'm based out of Hyderabad currently. Okay, so these are some blasts in the past. I got interviewed by Young Turks, by ZTV, and then these used to be these newspaper articles that used to show up highlighting how really IIT Bombay is becoming the petri dish to breed billionaires. Pretty odd and ambitious goal back then. But then you can also see the reference to the slowdown. Then IT slowdown has separated the men from the boys. So I do realize that we are almost hitting a recession in these times. There's impact on job and the whole industry outlook. So I just want to call out, I've seen 2 recessions, the 2001 recession, the 2008 recession. 2001 was when I was in the similar boat as yours. 2008 is when I was with Microsoft, which is around the time when I shut down my quant trading business to focus completely on Microsoft. So they were learning in both the places, and I'll share that with you. Okay, so before I go there, remember this piece, because see, the only way to be successful in your life is to love what you do and do what you love. And often you don't end up doing what you love, but in that case, you make what you do as your love, because that's the only way you can succeed. So which is where I refer to this quote from Steve Jobs that's quoted in his life biography, that your work is going to fill a large part of your life, and the only way to be truly satisfied is to do what you believe is great work, and the only way to do great work is to love what you do. So the choice that you make about your career, about your education, about your gig, make sure you're aligning it with your passion, right? And there are these, I think I often get asked, why have I spent 15 years with Microsoft, and what was the real purpose why I got into Microsoft after 3 startup stints? My purpose from the day one was very clear. I really wanted to understand how product are made at scale, how businesses are made at scale, because doing startups at a small scale is quite easy, but creating $100 billion profit making machinery on this planet is not easy, and Microsoft has managed to achieve it with the results that we see. And there are a bunch of learnings along the way. Some of it on the people side, some of it on the product side, and some of it on the business side. But essentially, the learning really is that Microsoft, essentially, as a business, we came back to the startup way of doing things when Satya became the CEO. Because as I talk about the 6 transcendental learnings, it will become clear about how when I joined in 2005 to now in 2020, how things have just kind of gone back to the square one, and we do things the way the startups do it. So number one is multitasking role. When I joined, there used to be operation role, there used to be test role, there used to be a developer role, there used to be a program manager role. Over a period of time, learning again from the startup, all these roles have become intermixed. Now there is this role which is called DevOps role, which is a mix of developer and operation. There's a role which is, there's no longer a test role. Everyone is a tester. Every piece of code that gets committed is supposed to be tested thoroughly by the engineer who wrote it. The buck stops there. Now an engineer cannot think that they can check in a dirty piece of code and someone else will take the ownership of it. So again, learning from the industry and learning from the way startups do their work. Essentially, when I was doing the startup, I was everything, right from the peon to the CEO. But Essentially, that's the whole notion of having a multitasking role, so that you develop the breadth for you to make sure that you are doing the right thing. Because in today's world, even our developers go and meet the customers. They spend time talking to them, understanding the customer perspective and being one with them, so that that perspective can then be brought into the product during the product discussion, during the brainstorming, as we write down the spec, as we code it, and then ultimately when we ship it. So that's the change that has happened. The second change that has happened is continuous shipping. Back then, in 2005 until even 2010, we were shipping products in 3 to 5 year cycle. Windows would come every 4 to 5 years, and Office would come every 3 years. And as a result, a lot of the lethargy existed in the system. We were pretty slow in our reaction. I remember this one piece when we released Office after iPad had already been announced, and our marketing folks created this video which showed how the pen feature and the touch feature in Office could be used so beautifully. I mean, it was not as beautiful but they really wanted to tell a picture to the customer that you can use your pen and touch in Office. But I realized, being the program manager, being part of the Office, in the 3 years we spent designing the product, we never even wrote a single line of code to make our touch or ink better. So what it essentially brings home is that by the time we envisioned our product to the time when we shipped it, the North Star had completely shifted, the industry had completely shifted, and we were not in a position to react to it because our shipping cycles were 3 year long shipping cycles. So again, learning from it, we now have shipping cycles which are completely controlled by this mechanism called flight. So we know how much we are able to flight it out to the customer. We can say that this feature can only go to 10% of the user base in US, let it go only to Fortune 500 companies, Fortune 100 companies. So we can basically essentially slice it, send it to a specific set of customers. But also we ship features with the frequency of a week and month, and some of them even multi-months, depending on how ready the customer is. But we are in this whole cycle of continuous shipping, and we've been able to transform and go back to, again, the startup way of doing things. Because again, in startups, we don't really have a V1, V2, V3 version of the product. Our features and our product completely continue to evolve, and we continue to demo it to the VCs, we continue to demo it to the customers, and that's how we essentially make sure that we are cutting edge when we're working in the startups. The third one is eating your own dog food. Again, this was a revelation for me when I came into Microsoft, and I realized that we make this most popular developer productivity tool called Visual Studio. But when it comes to our own engineering processes, we had something called Source Repo, which was completely different from Visual Studio. So essentially, we were not dog fooding our own product. We were not doing it in a way where we understand and we become our own customer. But today, we dog food all our product. We are the first responders or the first users of all our products. We make sure that we have an inner circle and a dog food circle where all the Microsoft employees are part of it. And then we release it to something called Microsoft Insiders, which is our next set of high-tech customers who really want to try out features in the product. The fourth one is that data is the moat. Essentially, we had these big properties called Hotmail.com, and we could have been the first mover when it came to things like online mailboxes, online services, ads. But essentially, in terms of strategy, what we ended up doing was we ended up reducing the mailboxes in the size of the mailbox in Hotmail, and on the other hand, Google went out and gave 1 GB. We were giving 2 MB of mailboxes in the Hotmail, without realizing how precious the data is and the insight that is based on the data. But thankfully, as of today, in Office 365, we have the biggest treasure trove in form of the data. And the amount of insight and amount of analysis we do on behalf of the enterprises, where the enterprises are the custodian of the data. We don't own the data. It all belongs, and neither do we own the insights on the data. It all belongs to the. So we do the data bit in a very ethical way, in the way which lays down the yardstick for how an enterprise ought to deal with the data of the consumer as well as for the enterprises. So we do it in a pretty ethical way. There's this book written by Brad Smith, who's our chief legal officer, Tools and Weapons. If you get a chance, do read about it. It does talk about this whole industry in terms of the AI and machine learning and how it's shaping up the future, and how key it is to be ethical about how we use the data, and how Microsoft is going out and doing it. Number 5 is that the consumer leads that trend. Essentially, consumers are the one who are the first adopter, the first mover. They decide what works, what doesn't work. Whatever is popular makes it way to the enterprises. This whole notion of bring your own devices became popular only because consumers were the one who were really enamored by iPad and iPhone, and they really wanted to continue to use it across the work and life. And this is another place where Microsoft was not doing well because we had Skype and then we have Skype for Business, and they had nothing to do with each other. They were different code bases, they were different feature set. They were just branded to be Skype, but they were two very different things. Same is true for mail. We had Hotmail and then we had Outlook or Exchange Mailbox, and both of them were very different code base, different data center, different experiences. So if the consumer is continuing to use it, or I say if students like you who continue to use Hotmail or Skype in your personal setup, in your educational setup, when you come to enterprise, you'll completely be surprised with the new tool who are still called Skype and who are still called, which is still called Mail, but they look very different. So over a period of time, we just made sure that whatever are the technology that we developed for enterprises, they also become the base for developing the technology in the consumer. So both of them essentially become one and the same. And then the culture of growth mindset. I think this is another one where hats off to a company like Microsoft, which has always been resilient. But with Satya coming in, we began talking about the notion of growth mindset, which is that we persist in the face of failure, but at the same time we continue to learn with our eyes open and the ear open, and that's the whole notion of growth mindset. And I can talk more about growth mindset if there is more time towards the end. But before I go there, I want to begin taking questions. Any comments, any thoughts from anyone in the audience before I move ahead?
I guess we can do these questions first.
Okay, great. Okay, so before going to question, let me actually just say two of my quotes before I go to questions. Okay. One is man ka ho to acha, na ho to zyada acha. I think the places where things have not gone as per my wish or desire, I think have been the cornerstone in my life in terms of what has shaped me. I leave this thought with all of you because often in my younger days, in my IIT days, I would really be very anxious about things that were not going as per my wish and my desire. And I was thinking that I'm not able to achieve my goal. But essentially now when I look back, I think whatever happened back then was the right things to happen because it ended up making me better and making me also be more purposeful about the goals I wanted to achieve in my life. So this is quite profound. Please remember this. The second one is really the power of belief and how it shapes your destiny. What's your belief? They become your thoughts. What's your thoughts? They become your words. What's your words? They become your action. And what's your actions? They become your habits. What's your habits? They become your values. What's your values? They become your destinies. Between what you believe to what you're destined to achieve in your life, everything is interlinked. And make sure that your belief system is rock solid because your belief will shape your thoughts and then your words, your action, your habits, values, and then it will become your destiny. So you ultimately are in the control of your destiny. And this is something I've realized in my last 20 years working as a professional, that if my beliefs are positive, if my words are positive, if my language is positive, if my relationship with people are positive, my destiny is destined to be great. This one again, I think a lot of us are pretty smart people. We think we are in the best university in the top-notch course, and we think we are the smartest. I don't know about you, but at least that's what I used to think. Very late in my career, I realized the difference between being smart versus being disciplined. And this is a quote from one of my biggest inspirations, Warren Buffett. He says, to be successful, you don't have to be smarter than the rest. You have to be more disciplined than the rest. So back in IIT, I remember these people who would get up at 6 in the morning, who would go and take a bath every day, who would go and attend the colleges, who would make sure that every T is crossed, every I is dotted. I think they were really being disciplined, and they're doing good in their life. They're successful. So I'll say marry your smartness with a discipline to make sure that you can make the best use of your smartness. Otherwise, smartness just gets dissipated along the way. There's so many smart people that I see around me who have not been able to achieve their potential. And the reason for that is they're less disciplined and they're less connected. Less connected in the sense that ultimately it is you're operating in a network of people. If you don't connect, if you don't reach out, if you don't network, your prowess will never get known, and then you will not be able to reach your full potential. So make sure that this is something that you apply early on in your career as opposed to later in the life. Okay. Okay. Now I'll go back to the question. Okay, let me see if I can run a poll before I go to the question. Okay, what are your current priorities in your life? Rate amongst, stack rank amongst these as you see this on the screen when you go to the URL. Is it health? Is it money? Is it family? Is it self-actualization? Or is it career? Sorry, let me just fix this. I think there is a typo here. Hold on, please. I asked this because all of us are going through this. I think we are in different phases of our life. I'm a professional with 20 years of experience. Some of you have worked and then you're doing your MTech. Others are students, and this is your first brush with anything outside of your outside of your hometown. So as you are dealing with it, what are your current priorities in life when you're looking for a new job? Are you looking for money? Are you looking for prioritizing your work, your well-being? Or self-actualization. Self-actualization is really about knowing yourself, meditating, and kind of being aware of who you are. Family is when you're really taking care of your family, your circle, your friends and families. And then work is really about how focused you are in terms of work. I think in your case, it should really be education. How focused are you on your projects, on your education, on the things that you're learning as of today? Okay, I'll stop when the ranking stops to move. Yeah, I'm pretty surprised that self-actualization is showing up as number one. This is quite astonishing, which means that all of you are pretty self-aware of the role that this plays in the success of your life. And money, I'm not surprised that it is kind of second or in the topmost. Family and health, I think these are the times when family and health needs to focus. But work is the fifth, and that's a surprise. It's a good surprise. So let me actually just quickly just show you the formula that I learned from my managing director Rajiv, as he talks about work-life balance, and especially it becomes important in the context that we're dealing with. Most of you will be around 22 years of age, 22, 25 years, 20 to 25 years of age, which is when you are really looking at building your career, looking forward to the job that you want to take. And this is typically the priority: money, work, family, and self-actualization. Health, we don't pay any attention on. And it's important to figure out that health actually is a continuous stream. We should continuously focus on paying attention on the health because it's one of the currencies that once you lose, it's very hard to gain back. And it takes quite amount of intentionality and focus to make sure that you manage your health and your well-being properly. There was a time when I became 95 kgs of weight. And because I did not realize that health is supposed to be a priority, but that was around also the time when I started picking up all these lifestyle diseases like things related to sugar and BP and those kind of things, the early indication of it. But then I made sure I fixed my lifestyle and my health. So when you're early, the priority is really money. When you are old, the priority really becomes health, and then self-realization or spirituality, and then family, and then work and money. And from today to the time when you are old, the priority just kind of inverts. From money being the top priority to money being the last priority, because that's the time when you're really struggling with health. Uh, but it's important to realize that this change is not sudden. That this change really goes through what we call the midlife crisis. In America, you'll see people who are in the midlife, they would have divorced 5 times already. Then they would go out and buy a red car and then go and spend their time in Las Vegas. So they really are going through a midlife crisis because their priorities in their lives are inverted and they're failing to recognize or realize it. So make sure, again, this is one of the things, this is forward looking, but this was eye-opening for me because it does lay down the fact that as you move further in your career, you will be making your own family. It's important to focus on your health, but at the same time, make sure your priorities are right, so that in this whole process, you do not get disillusioned and do not victimize yourself saying, "I'm not in the right trajectory or right path." Do realize that life is a marathon, and for you to win that marathon, you need to have a long life. For you to have a long life, you need good health. Focus on your health. Make sure that you're prioritizing for the long term, not the short term. In the short term, there are people who are going ahead, they are doing things which is which is better accomplished which is the better accomplishment. Let that happen. Don't worry about it. Think about 20-year, 30-year time horizon. Think about the legacy that you leave behind when you are done with the most fruitful period of your life. Because that is what will give you will make people remember you, and which will give you the cherishment when you get old in life. So, with that thought, let me go back to the questions. We have around half an hour and I'll take all these questions. If there are any more questions, feel free to put them in the chat window and I will try to take them. Okay, question number one is, you worked on Shaadi.com while you were a student. What motivated you to work on this? So I think I answered this question as I was narrating my career journey. And I was talking about how ignorance was a bliss. I wanted really to be a tent house owner, and I had my brush with entrepreneurship, and I did Shaadi.com, then Mysis.com. But essentially, I think having a larger than life view of what you want to accomplish, and there's a lot of research which backs this, because if you have a purpose in mind, there's this quote I'm sure a lot of must have heard about, इतनी शिद्दत से मैंने तुमको पाने की कोशिश की है कि हर जर्रे ने मुझे तुमसे मिलाने की कोशिश की है. And there is an English version of it also. But it really is true. If you make up your mind and you lay your eyes on it, it will happen. No matter how unsurmountable it may seem. There's a notion of unconscious incompetence to unconscious competence. So when we begin, ignorance is a bliss, and we are in the zone called unconscious incompetence. We don't know what we don't know, right? And then over a period of time, it becomes conscious. We know what we don't know, and then over a period of time, it becomes we get to know about it, and we know what we know. And then over a period of time, it has to become we don't know what we know, because then it has to go into your subconscious mind. For example, when you're learning to ride a bicycle, you are consciously learning. You are like vexed up, saying, "I should not fall down. I should not end up meeting an accident." But over a period of time, you will come to a day where you will be riding a bicycle without even being aware that you're riding a bicycle, and that's the zone of unconscious competence, because you build a competence that you're not conscious about. It has gone into your individual psychology. So be on that journey as you yourself are laying down a goal for you. There are things that you are not aware of, and that's a bliss, because ignorance is bliss. Lay down a goal which is larger than life, and then over a period of time, be intentional. Let your subconscious mind work towards it, and I think there'll be a day when you'll be able to achieve it. I did talk about this phase completely. So I'll move on to the next question now. What are the choices that I have in the industry after I come out as a graduate? I think this is a good question, especially now because the world is changing. And let's talk about what is changing actually. But before that, let me actually talk about what are the, this is something that I heard from, I think, Birut Sheth. He was one of the alumni who came back to talk in the campus. So a lot of my outlook towards the world has actually been shaped by alumni like Rakesh Mathur, Birut Sheth, Kashyap Devra, who have come back to talk about what they have been doing with their life, how they think, what are the tips that they leave for us as the students. So Birut Sheth, he was talking about what are the three ways to, because someone asked him why have you chosen to be an entrepreneur, and he said there are three ways to change the world or make an impact in the world: be an entrepreneur, or be a politician, or be a social worker. Now, depending on what you can relate to the most, you can pick up what you want to be: an entrepreneur, a politician, or a social worker. But each of them have a different path to get there. Uh, Now, the word is going through a change, but essentially, I think in terms of the roles that exist in a company like Microsoft or any technology company are three big roles. The role of a developer, which is the most natural one you can relate to coming from a computer science stream. The second is that of a program manager, the role that I took on. These essentially are the folks who define, who listen to the customer, who define, who abstract it, who define what the product should be, work with the designer, and then really shape the product in a way where it gets shipped out to the customer. Chose to become a program manager because I realized that 80% of the code that I was writing in my startups was going to waste because I was spending time in doing things that my customer did not even need. So there was a vacant need to kind of listen to the customer and then kind of connect it with the engineering we do to make sure that the engineering we do is aligned with what our customer desires, because that's the only way you can create a business success. That's the reason why I chose to be program manager. Depending on, again, how much abstraction you can handle, how much of a conversationalist you are, not conversationalist in the sense of whether you are an introvert or extrovert, conversationalist in the sense of how much analysis can you do, how much abstraction you can do, how much synthesis can you do, how much do you love listening and ideating and questioning and inquiring the customer, will define where you want to be. I have folks working with me who come from computer science background chose to be a designer because they think ultimately the path to a successful product is by designing it well, and Apple has proved it over and over again. So a lot of the designers today are actually computer engineers who went on to do a design specialization in their MS courses. Then there are people like me who chose to be program manager, and then there are computer engineers who are deep down passionate about engineering, and they want to solve the problem in the best possible way by taking a good pride in their craftsmanship. Okay, then coming further deep into Microsoft specifically, I think Microsoft is a company which uh, which provides a spectrum of opportunity which I think no other company on the planet provides. And the reason why I say this is you come into Microsoft in engineering, within engineering, there's specialization on security and compliance. So now we have and I'm not even going to Redmond, I'm talking about IDC, India Development Center. We have a team of around 500 people which specializes just in security and compliance, make sure that we have the best of the security engineers, best of the hackers working with us to make sure that we make this world a safe place, not just for individuals, but also for the enterprises. Then we have a team on devices. We now are a contributor to the devices that get shipped from Microsoft, like the Surface lineup of hardware, the Surface Duo, the phone that got just shipped from Microsoft. We had a big role to play there as well. Right. Then we have the discipline of our DevOps. These are the folks who really are involved with the operations of the data center, making sure that the customer data is protected, our services are up and running, our SLAs are met. So that also is a great space to be in. And then we have data science. As a space where all people who are aspirant about data science, machine learning, AI have a great role to play there. And then we have this other discipline called research. These are the set of people who really are responsible for working with the customer in understanding them better, going to a specific geography, understanding what is it that are the unmet or the unarticulated need of the customer. This whole space is called UX researcher, user experience researcher, or market researcher. So this is another place where if you love design, synthesis, and abstraction, this is a great place to be in. So I'll just summarize: security, devices, DevOps, data science, and researcher are another way to look at how engineering can really proliferate and play a different role there. Right, and a lot of it I was not even aware of when I was coming out of IITs, because I thought there's one thing called computer engineer. You won't become an engineer. So there's a spectrum. Just be aware of that. If not today, maybe further down in your career, you'd want to pick up what you want to take up. Also, as you're deciding what you want to study after your BTech, some of you may want to do your MTechs also, or your PhDs. Just be aware that I think there are the disciplines with which you can relate to in order to make your research or make your specialization better. Also, I think there is this hidden sentiment about, I mean, there is this sentiment about the downturn or the recession, but I just want to say, I think India, especially the IT segment, is not as touched by recession, especially the companies which are working on product development. In fact, Microsoft is continuing to grow in India. Amazon and Google also are betting big on India in a big way. There is some geopolitical situation because of which there is more emphasis on growing in India as opposed to other controversial geographies out there. So this is also as a result of it, but India happens to be one of those also cost-effective geography with pretty high talent. So if you're making a choice between, oh, where do you want to really go in and settle, I'll say, at least for time being, make a choice to settle or begin your career in India. India is really doing great in terms of all the parameters being on the right trajectory. US, at least with, again, the whole uncertainty around the visa situation and the recession and the more incumbent sentiment, where there is more focus on providing job to the citizens before the outsider. There is some of that playing in, but I'll say in terms of priority, I'll say focus on India and then China. Now, yeah, I'm just referring my notes if I missed out anything. Yeah, and as I said earlier in the conversation, that communication, finance, taxes, empathy, accountability are not taught to us, neither in our +2 nor in our engineering. But these are really the one that makes a difference between a performer versus a stellar performer. So make sure you are investing yourself consciously, making yourself better in terms of understanding the complication of communication, taxes, human empathy, human connection, and the sense of accountability. Accountability is really about being professional, doing what you say and saying what you're doing. These things hold the key to professional success. But at the same time, keep an eye on what is changing about the future and how the roles will evolve. Hopefully that gave an answer for the choices that I have in industry after I come out as a graduate. Okay. If this question has any other hidden or unanswered aspects, please type it in the chat window. I'll try to come to it. What all skills do companies look for when recruiting a recent graduate? So that again is a great question, because again, coming out of IITs, I thought the only thing that companies look out for is the GPA or the CGPA, CPI. I don't know if we still call it CPI then, but maybe a track record of the projects you worked on. But essentially, I think that is only one aspect among the other 5 aspects we look out for when we hire. We look for how much a drive for result you have. So essentially, when you take on a challenge or a problem, are you able to just embrace it, deal with the ambiguity, and apply? I'm using a bit of Hindi just to make a point, but if any of you don't understand type it in the chat window. I'll put a translation. How much out of the comfort zone are you willing to go in order to achieve the or impact the problem space you're going after? There's this notion of Kam, Sam, Dand, Bhed. Whatever it takes, just go ahead and apply it and make sure that you achieve your results and you have the drive for that. And in achieving your result, you are not the only one who's going out. You take your team along with you. So that's one aspect that is evaluated. So if you see that during the early part of the conversation, during interview, the interviewers are talking to you, they're also trying to understand these human aspects within you. How much drive of results, the result you have, how much of a team player are you, how much do you take your team along as you are on this journey of drive for result. The second aspect, obviously, is your intellectual horsepower. How much you're able to engage, how much you're having to hold on to the conversation, go into the depth of the conversation. And often me as a student, when I was part of IITs, I'll treat these CAC sessions in the corridors of the hostel as a gossip or a waste of time. But some of these CAC sessions are actually quite profound because they take you into the depth and breadth of the areas that you would otherwise not explore into. Being part of those CAC sessions has really helped me understand how to really apply the intellectual horsepower in the context of work. So this is another place where when you are having a conversation with the interviewer about an algorithm, about a problem, and they're trying to give you a different variation of it to make sure that you can come up with a next best solution or a more optimal solution, that's where they're trying to understand your IHP. Then the other one is impact and influence. See, again, when we work in the corporate setup, we don't work in a hierarchy. We work in a setup called matrix organization. So we'll be working with this matrix set of people, and we'll be the only way we can get the job done is by impact and influence. We cannot exercise authority. Authority only works when we are in a hierarchy, and that too also it does not work well because it ends up creating a lot of disharmony in our people relationship. So there are these succinct or silent ways of impact and influence where you would basically go and have conversation with people, understand what their sentiments are, what their concerns are. You divide and conquer, and then ultimately you get the group together and create a consensus. So that's another place which plays a big role in terms of making a hire, in terms of how much you're good with impact and influence and helping make decision, taking people along. And as I said, communication plays a good part also. So communication is not just not about command on language. It's really about your clarity in thinking and how well are you able to articulate that thinking. Even if you have a weak hold on the language, that does not matter. That is perfectly fine. Right. And then your grit and growth mindset. A growth mindset is this notion that intelligence is not a one-time. Actually, I have a slide on that. Let me actually see if I can show it. Yeah, so fixed mindset is a growth mindset is the notion that intelligence is grown or is acquired over a period of time. It's not fixed, and this is a culture that we live in Microsoft. My intelligence can be developed. I may not know something today, but I will learn it. And when I had that question in which I said no, yes, and not yet was really about growth mindset, which means that, yeah, life is a continuous journey. If I have not encountered something today, if I have not learned something today, does not mean that I'll fail and I'll never learn it. I can still learn it. And you're making notion about others in your life, don't think that they don't know it and they'll be a failure. They don't know it today. Tomorrow they'll know it because they'll spend time in learning it. So intelligence is not fixed. It's acquired. Is this whole notion of growth mindset. So that's another thing that's tested during the interview journey in a big way, and that makes a hire no hire. That makes a difference in the hire no hire decision. So I think I covered all of it, and obviously above all of it, let me actually talk about the foundation, which is the foundation of respect, integrity, and accountability. And there is this quote from Warren Buffett, who says that when you look at hiring a person, look for intelligence and integrity. Don't bother with don't bother with the first if the person does not have second, right? So integrity is so crucial. Make sure that in every forum, be it your personal space or workspace, you hold on to that, be respectful to others, and be a heavy sense of accountability. Because in Microsoft, our values are respect, integrity, and accountability. And at any point of time, if it shows up that you are non-integral in terms of doing your work, being true to your role in your language, it actually creates a doubt in the mind of the interviewer whether you are a culture fit to come and join Microsoft. Though I'm saying it in the context of Microsoft, it is generally applicable in every professional setup you go for. Respect, integrity, accountable are the foundation. Drive for result, intellectual horsepower, impact and influence, communication, growth mindset are the influencers in terms of the decision making for the interview. Again, if there are any aspects that I haven't addressed, please write it in the chat. I'll take it up. What is the present scope in industry? Okay, so one thing I'll say is industry definitely is transforming. I think had it not been for this pandemic or COVID, the amount of transformation that we have seen in the last 6 months would have taken at least 6 years for us to get to. Education space has completely transformed. Remote tool are a big opportunity. Travel industry has travel and tourism industry, which were the evergreen industry always for last 100 years, has taken a hit. So keep that in mind. But the industry which is continuing to do great is the product industry or the IT, not IT industry. I would say IT is still struggling because of the geo politics, political situation that is active right now. But at least the product industry is doing well because this is our opportunity to make the physical divide be bridged by the digital tools that we are creating. I think the uptake of product like Teams, product like all the products that we have, including Office 365, Windows, all of them have seen a huge uptake. In fact, that's the reason why we are continuing to grow. We are continuing to hire another 1,500 people this year. And we'll be on the campus also at the IIT Bombay, make the best use of it. But essentially, I think among this whole recession, the big companies at least are not big companies in the product space are not as affected. Apple, I was expecting at least they'll be impacted because of the impact on China and the impact on the supply chain, but it seemed that also they've recovered from. Even our supply chain on Surface is completely recovered, and we are continuing to make hardware, ship hardware, because we do realize this is a need for the hour. Apart from the health and the hospitals, people do need technology. I think the usage of Windows, usage of laptops in the household where there are 3 or 4 people, each of them on their laptops, taking classes, attending to office, really needs a lot of hardware in the houses to make sure that we can live through this complex situation that is ahead of us. One opportunity that definitely is showing up, and if any of you are considering to be an entrepreneur, is really the opportunity in the field of education. I think with this whole economic divide we have in India, and with the physical space all of a sudden vanishing, we notice a void, especially in the weaker segment of the society, where the kids are not able to attend classes, their schools are not going online, and they are at the risk of losing their 1 year of their life in the school completely. So I think this is an opportunity where if any of you are considering entrepreneurship, do consider how you can bridge this gap of education. I think as I have experienced my life in last 20 years, I have realized, at least in the context of India, that education is a big influencer and is economic leveler. When it comes to the opportunities in life. The reason why there is so much of divide, economic divide in India, is because of the lack of education and the lack of a even platform for everyone to be on the same at the same level when it comes to acquiring the education. And this situation in the last 6 months has actually created another bigger divide, because now the richer kids are able to attend classes, go online, and be part of the education system. The poorer are still at home. They don't know what to do. Their family members are still going and doing their job, and these are really blue collar jobs where they can't be at home. So do figure out how to bridge that device and make sure that as we continue in this situation, how can we really make the life of the weaker segment of the societies be better by bringing them in the fold of education. Okay. Are there any changes in the industry due to this pandemic? Is any part of the industry which has been benefited, detriment due to this? I think I talked about this.
Sandeep, Maithili here.
Yeah.
Interest of time, there are 6 online live questions. Would you like to
Okay.
take them? We have 6 minutes of time left for the meeting. How do you want to do
it? Let me actually take them.
Tanay, over to you. If you can
Yeah.
read out the questions.
Yeah.
I'll just flash these 10 questions
difficult?
because mostly these are covered, but I'll try to cover it in these questions that are coming up as well. Go for it.
Yeah. How difficult was it to move from Deloitte back to entrepreneurship? How did you manage your finance expectations from your families?
Yeah, that's a pretty good question. Yeah, so I talk about this notion of risk appetite and your financial cushioning, because if you don't have that, I think you cannot take risks in your life. And coming from the family of non-business family or the family of white collar workers, I did not have as much of a cushion to go and start my business. So essentially, when I was aware of these constraints. So when I was doing my entrepreneurship, I really wanted to do a business which is profitable from day one. And when I did my third business, which was Mintos, I really did not put in my own money. I asked the people who were coming with me to put their money, and I put in the technology and have a deal with them where we were equally responsible and equally were leading the business. But when I started that business, we were cash positive from day one, because it took me 6 months to develop the software, which is when I went into a low cost geography like Surat, working part-time and helping my friend Mayank in that process. But I used that 6 months to write the software. When I came back to Bombay, I already knew the IP that I had, and I was working. And then I found the partner with whom I started working. But coming back to managing the expectation of the family, I think the best way to tell your family is that I want to experiment. So once you are an IITian, you are not going to get lost in your life because you have the big brand behind you. And I think there are only two ways or two real zones in your life where you can experiment. You can experiment early in your life, when you are fresh, you have a lot of energy, but you don't have as much of wisdom. Or you experiment late in the life when you have a lot of wisdom, but you don't have as much, hopefully don't have as much energy to go out and do your entrepreneurship. The first phase, I think, is quite foundational to what shapes you as an individual, and it is I think it's in your interest to convince your family to make sure that they understand that you are taking on few experiments in your life to learn and leverage them. And my family was, at least initially, they did not understand, but then they realized they cannot really influenced me in big way. At least my big brother, who was in US, he has moved on to settle in the US. So they let me experiment for a while until that day came in 2008, when the recession hit the industry, including the stock market as well, because of this security transaction tax that was introduced by PC Chidambaram. And my not 2008, this was 2004 or something. My parents really were pressuring me to get into a stable job to make sure that they can marry me, which is when I made a choice to get into a job. But I also continue to do my moonlighting. So be aware of the constraints you have, because you cannot get rid of them. They are part of who you are. And then basically figure out what you want to do and how you want to do it. Be creative about it is what I'll say. And this reality will differ from individual to individual. So I'll let you take a decision. But in case you're looking for some guidance or some mentorship from me, I'll leave my phone number, email address, and phone number. I'll be happy to get in touch with you one-on-one and see how I can impact that. You can go on to the next question, Tanya.
So once you do entrepreneurship and fail or sell it and later decide to join a job, do you have any tips on how to love that job or make that exciting?
Yeah, so that's again a beautiful question because see, as I said, right, love what you do what you love. It's not easy. The only way to love what you do is to make it commensurate with who you are, with what your brand is. Because if you just take a job as the way it is, as per its traditional role definition, you'll be bored to death. Because that means that you are really following the yardstick or the expectation that has been set up by a predecessor who was in your role. So the way I have really worked around this is that I've really taken on a job and been so passionate about it that I have just changed the role definition to make it mine. And in every job that I have done it like an entrepreneur. So no boundaries of role or definition. Be creative in terms of solution seeking. Reach out, talk to people. Make sure you bring everyone together. Do apply Kam Sam Dandabhed. Make sure you get funding, and make sure that, I mean, it does need a lot of human tact to do it, but you also need that human tact when you are an entrepreneur. So the short answer there is uh, 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 embrace it and make it your own. That's the only way to kind of thrive in what you're doing.
Very well said, sir. Very well. You should embrace what you do. Sir, there is one more question. During your time, it was about new websites. Now it is all about smartphone apps. But do you think the smartphone app industry is already saturated right now? Or is there still a huge potential for app market? Because B2C apps are something people can start off with a small team and launch easily.
Yeah, see, depending on which segment of the user base you're looking at, the opportunity will look different to you. If you're looking at consumers, the interface to consumer is through an app, right? But if you're looking at the next billion user, the interface to the next billion user is through artificial intelligence. And the only way to get there, especially with the kind of background all of you are coming in with, is to basically kind of go deep into data science and artificial intelligence and its application. But as I'm saying this, for example, I'm continuing to pursue my passion with quantitative trading. And quantitative trading, for those of you who are not aware, is really about how do you marry the mathematics with the computer science and apply it in the field or the domain of finance in the real-time trading. And there, if you really go, there is an immense potential in terms of how you really take data science. And the data science is real there because you get live data about stock prices, about people spend and purchase habit, about the world economics, the macroeconomics, and it's continuous because the stock market opens in New Zealand and then in Japan and then in Malaysia, then in Singapore, Beijing, India, and then Middle East and Europe. So it's a 24-hour cycle. And then there are multiple markets. The market like currency market, the commodity market, the bit currency market, the stock market, derivative market, option market. So if you really love computer science and you're really looking for application of computer science, I'll invite you to kind of go deep into the application of computer science in a field which makes the best use of it, which is quantitative trading. It will give you a kick if you do that. But other than that, you are absolutely dot on. I think the apps are dime a dozen, and they will sooner or later kind of die the death because there are millions of apps, but there are only probably 10 or 20 which are popular and which people end up using. When essentially it is important to go for what is called the network effect, and you should go for the user base. There is this whole notion of network effect if you're really looking at building a business and a large scale big grade business. Search for network effect Bible on Google. You'll come across this one pager which talks about various kind of network effect. And app by itself is not the best business model. App is a piece of an interface or a technology. Focus on the foundations that can help you create a strong business model, is how I'll say it. So do a bit of research on a network effect Bible, and you will realize that there's so many other ways to kind of make an impact in the life of the people and create a business model on technology, which can be successful. Think like, for example, TikTok, right? It was not an app essentially. It was a game on psychology, and it had a game theory behind it. But it essentially was going for a network effect. So even when you are writing an app, you have to nail the problem of network effect before you go to the app, because if you don't know how you're going to acquire the user, how are you going to make your app relevant in the life of the people, how are you going to bring them coming back to your app, you will not be able to nail that problem space. I think I gave the answer in two parts. The best use of the computer science, mathematics, and the human psychology is in quant market. Second is, don't go for the app, but go for the business model or the success underneath the app, and then app will be a byproduct of it.
Sir, I have one more quick question. We are running out of time, but can I take this one question?
I can go over if needed. If audience has the appetite, I can go over by 15 minutes. But I do realize there's a lot of value in the conversation, the Q&A we are having. So you decide, Tanya.
Sir, I have been asked by a lot of my friends, and I know a lot of people would relate to it. How can someone from a non-computer science domain jump to a CSE domain? Like someone who's studying in a different branch here at IIT, but wants to pursue computer science. What is the way that they should go around doing this?
Yeah, so I think that's again one of the very phenomenal questions. At least when you go to the Western countries, a lot of the folks who work in computer science may not even have the computer science background. They come with the specialization in physics, in music, and gardening, and rock climbing, but they still make it to the computer science, because computer science is a field which is wanting or looking for diversity. Go back to Steve Jobs' life. He had no degree on computer science, but the kind of products he ended up making were so phenomenal because he came from some random course he did on typography because he was in a university. And I'm sure all of you must have seen Three Idiot, the story of Ranchod. This is Sonam Wangchuk. The key message there is knowledge is all around you. You go around scrapping the bottom and making sure that you are relishing the knowledge that's coming to you. The 4 years that you spend in IIT, make sure that you relish each and every piece of or morsel of knowledge or gyan that comes to you, because you don't realize how much profound effect it will have further down in your life when you go in and start applying these learnings you're having, not just academic learning, but also the human learning, the people learning, the business learning, and the communication skills. Just scrap off the barrel and relish everything that comes along the way. But when it comes to non-computer science background, especially in the context of India, I think there's a lot more opportunity now. In the context of Microsoft, I think the best place to begin there is the discipline of program manager. Because program managers essentially are the one who are it's a multidimensional discipline. You need to have a good understanding of computer science, and the good conversation, good understanding of the business environment, good understanding of engineering in general for you to become a program manager. And the kind of diverse field that we are proliferating into, we are also begun hiring mechanical engineering, electrical engineering, because our vision really is to have one day where we start manufacturing Surface devices in India. So we have a team of critical mass here, which is not just software engineer, but also mechanical engineer, electrical engineering. So if you are in engineering, deep in engineering, there's opportunity, but in a less way. But a good way to begin your career there is program management.
Well said, sir. Well said. Sir, will quantum computing and its applications take off in the near future? Is studying it worth it from a financial perspective?
Yeah, good question. There was this 9th question that you see on my screen, right? Let me answer that. Then I'll come to quantum computing. I think both of them are related.
Yes, sir.
Right. So what are the financial aspects of a career in computer science? So one thing I'll say is it is the future, because every company in the world ultimately is a is a is a is going through digital transformation, and each of them is a software company, as my CEO Satya says it. So this field has immense potential and immense in depth. And if you think about what is a superpower today, and as I was analyzing it, I think definitely your health. You can become a Superman, a Superwoman, if you have your health in your control. You're disciplined about it. And second is you are calm and focused, because calmness and focus in today's world is a virtue. And the third is you have a good hold on a discipline like computer science, which is future looking, and a discipline like data science, which holds the key to the human insights, which can help really make a decision for you. What will change as a result of quantum computing really is the speed and the mechanics of how computing gets done, which means that a lot of things that actually takes hundreds and millions of hours and years for us to solve will actually get solved in a shorter period of time. But I'll say if you are really looking at application of quantum computing, those applications, at least the way you apply it, will not change. I think the computer languages that will be applicable in the context of computer science, Microsoft is already talking about QHash and is also kind of making it public about how you can really program on top of quantum computing. So quantum computing is something that will not be on everyone's laptops and desk. It will be in data centers. You'll be able to connect to it. You'll be able to program. You can make your things run much faster. The paradigm of financial market, the paradigm of risk, the paradigm of security, all of that will change. But if you really want to go and engineer quantum computing, I think it's definitely worth pursuing. But if you are really looking at it from an application point of view, that paradigm is not going to change much. So I'll say be aware of it, but stay grounded in the reality, because this area of quantum computing is still, it will take around next 5 to 10 years for it to become a reality and come to life. But the applications of the core applications of data science, the core application of finances and cryptocurrencies, all of that will continue to work the way it is working today, but it will just take a leap of speed and computing as the quantum computing.
Yes, sir. I feel that all the students have all their doubts and anxieties answered. Thanks a lot, sir, for this session. It was a really informative one, and we have a lot to take home. To get such close insights and such valuable pieces, we shall definitely inculcate all these activities in our lives, and we shall greatly benefit with them. Thanks a lot for guiding us on this, sir. It was really a pleasure to have you with us.
Great. Thank you, everyone, for being a part of this, and thank you, Tanay, for hosting it. It was a pleasure coming back to IIT and participating virtually with all of you, and having a conversation in this format. I will leave my email address with you, Tanay. You can share it with the group, and if there are any further conversation or dialogues all of you may want to have with me, I shall be available to make sure that I can engage and help. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks a lot, sir. Thanks a lot. It was a pleasure to have you with us here.
Thank you, Tanay. And thank you, everyone at IIT Bombay. We'll see each other in person pretty soon. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Bye-bye.
Bye, sir.